So the economics specification says that as far as fiscal policy goes, the thing that you need to be able to do is you need to be able to distinguish between expansionary and contractionary fiscal policy and examine how the government can use these to stabilize the business cycle. So that's what we're really going to focus in on in this video. So we're looking at page 89 there in the notes in book 2. So you've three important definitions here. So fiscal policy itself, then expansionary and contractionary, right? So let's look at the definition for fiscal policy. So this is an important one. So let's get an asterisk beside that. Make sure that you can give this exact definition if you're asked to explain it, because they have in recent times asked to explain monetary policy, so they could easily ask to explain fiscal policy. So remember, like in terms of like the definition, as most definitions are very wordy, but like what it really is it's just trying to use taxes or spending to control the economy. So it's trying to use one of two things to try for the government to try and achieve their economic aims. But this is the formal definition. So it refers to those actions taken by the government which influence the size, timing, and magnitude of government spending and taxation. So it's any action taken by the government which affects the size, timing, and magnitude of government spending and tax. So really we're talking about it the budget. It's any change in government spending, taxation that's designed to change overall spending in the economy. But the first line is the really important one then. So it can be expansionary or it can be contractionary, right? So if you're trying to expand something, you're trying to make it bigger. So you're trying to encourage economic growth if you have an expansionary fiscal policy. And if you're contracting something, you're trying to make it smaller. So you might be trying to slow down an economy that's growing too fast because you're worried about inflation, or you're worried about it overheating and crashing or something like that. So coming back to my previous point here, it's all about using taxes and spending. So if you're trying to expand the economy, how would you use tax and spending? Well, if you think back to the circular flow of income, taxation is leakage and spending is an injection. So you'd reduce the leakage and increase the injection, and then you'd expand the economy. So that's what it's about. And this stuff, like, you understand what I'm saying here, you're totally done as far as revision goes. You're not going to have to come back to this time and time again. Just like, I totally understand that. So expansionary fiscal policy is a decrease in taxation. So that's going to give us more disposable income because the government are taking less money off us, right, if it's income tax. And then an increase in government expenditure. Another way they're just giving us more money. Like both of those, the net result is more money for us, more disposable income, more spending. And you might use essentially to fight recessionary pressures. So that's the important thing here. You're trying to expand the economy during a bad time. So it's a counter-cyclical measure. Like, it goes against what is happening in the economy. It's like I said in the previous video, like if you're a household and you're having financial troubles, you wouldn't try and spend your way out of it and reduce your income and spend more money, but actually an economy is slightly different. So you would try and expand it when times are tough, actually, and you're experiencing recessionary pressures, to try and fuel economic growth. That's the idea. And you see this is crucial. It will tend to worsen the budget deficit and will need to increase borrowing. So it's a little bit counterintuitive. Like, you're experiencing a recession, the economy in the country is not going great. The government are already struggling for tax revenue because people don't have jobs maybe. And then we're suggesting that maybe they should borrow money and try and spend their way out of it. Yeah, that is kind of what we're saying. And that is essentially really what we did during COVID, right? So this whole idea was kind of first touted following the Great Depression from Keynes. Like, up to that point, economics had kind of said, oh, if you leave things alone, the government don't get involved in the economy, even if it's doing badly, you leave things alone, eventually it'll come into a state of equilibrium. But then following the Wall Street crash in 1929 into the Great Depression, Keynes realized, we could be waiting a long time if we just leave things alone. Yes, it might eventually happen that the economy comes back in a state of equilibrium, but to speed things up, we need the government to intervene. He was suggested what the government need to do to get the economy going is they need to borrow loads of money and just get people doing something. So even if it involves just digging holes in the road and then filling them back in again, as long as you borrow money, give them a job to do and pay them, that will get the economy going, because then they'll spend it and we'll experience a multiplier effect, and the money will make its way back to government through tax revenue. That was kind of very loosely the idea. And then a contractionary fiscal policy then is just the opposite, right? So with contractionary, you're going to increase taxes. So you're trying to slow down the economy, trying to slow down spending. So you're going to reduce aggregate demand down. Maybe you're worried about demand pull inflation. And you're going to decrease government expenditures. So you're going to increase the leakage and reduce the injection. And the whole point here is you're fighting inflationary pressures. This will tend to improve the budget deficit. So it's like when we looked at one of the first videos here, we looked at one of the different types of budget. We said, like, an inflationary budget is one where you actually borrow money and you spend loads, but it can, like a budget surplus, where the government are actually taking more out than they're putting into the economy, would be considered a deflationary budget. So neutral fiscal policy then is where you're just not really following either approach. So it involves government spending being equal to tax revenue. Just means that what the government are doing in terms of tax, it doesn't really impact on economic behaviour. The government aren't really trying to boost or reduce aggregate demand. So last thing to look at here is on page 90 there, you see at the top of the page, with an expansionary fiscal policy, so anytime you're using fiscal policy, you're either doing something here or you're doing something here for the government, and you're trying to control the economy with one of these two guys. That's all it is. So obviously with taxes, you've got direct and indirect taxes. And if you're trying to control the economy, it's all well and good saying, well, if they're trying to expand the economy, they should decrease tax. But there's different options available. They could decrease indirect taxes, or they could decrease direct taxes. So there are different options available, and we'll look at them in more detail in later videos. And then there's loads of different ways they could increase spending. It could be capital infrastructure projects, it could be public sector wages, could be social welfare, etc. But there are some difficulties of trying to have an expansionary fiscal policy. So remember, that's about trying to make the economy bigger. First of all, like we just said, you have to run a budget deficit. So you are increasing spending and reducing the money you're getting. So you're overspending essentially. So that is one of the difficulties. That means you have to borrow money. So in order to finance increased expenditure, the government will have to borrow money, which leads to an increase in our national debt. So you would always associate a budget deficit with an increase in our national debt. And the NTMA, they're the ones who need to borrow, and they'll need to sell bonds. And that means that they're going to have to meet interest payments. So there is a bit of a cost to this. So you'll have to run a deficit. That's the first difficulty. But also, see here, they will have regular interest yield payments that need to be paid back after the policy ends. So well into the future, if you really go for a big expansionary policy and a big deficit, you could be paying that off well into the future, because you have to pay the interest on the money that you've borrowed.